One stormy night, a stranger showed up at my door, soaked, shivering, and completely unexpected. I thought I was offering her shelter, but by morning, everything had changed. Some moments don't just pass, they stay with you, quietly rewriting everything you thought you knew. If you believe the most powerful stories begin when you least expect them, hit like, subscribe, and stay till the end. The forecast had warned Brooklyn to brace for a storm, the kind that doesn't fall so much as it occupies the sky and empties itself without mercy. For once, the prediction held true. Rain came down in thick, punishing sheets, turning streets into rivers, and the evening commute into a slow, grinding ordeal. My name is Angela Hunt, 32. Newly made Queen's Counsel at Ashford Chambers, the youngest the firm has ever elevated. The title carried weight, prestige, and its own quiet resistance. Sideways glances from the old guard, a senior clerk who still seemed to think important briefs belonged in male hands. I had corrected that assumption sharply not long ago. The aftermath lingered, but it didn't matter tonight. Survival, not status, was the only concern. By early evening, the borough had unraveled. Traffic locked itself into place, engines idling in endless lines. What should have been a simple journey stretched into something exhausting and uncertain. Buses crawled across the Brooklyn Bridge, their windows clouded with trapped breath. Below, the East River churned under the assault of heavy drops that struck like thrown stones. Near Borough Hall, a delivery cyclist cut recklessly through the frozen lanes, weaving between vehicles with the confidence of someone who lived on that edge. Her insulated pack shifted with every sharp turn, carrying the scent of Thai curry into the wet chaos. She slipped past a black town car waiting uselessly at the curb. Inside that car, a passenger collapsed into the leather seat, soaked through, while the driver filled the crawl toward Park Slope with a relentless commentary on politics. Mile by inch, they moved until finally, near Prospect Park West, the door opened to a world that felt less like rain and more like immersion. Sidewalks surged with people moving in tight, urgent currents, gathering beneath awnings, spilling past shuttered stands. The Atlantic Avenue station swallowed them whole. Underground, delay notices flickered across screens, signal failures blamed on drowned tracks. Staff guided the crowds with tired gestures. Platforms grew slick, trains packed tight with damp coats and quiet frustration. At 7th Avenue, the F train shuddered to a halt just before 10. Doors opened, releasing passengers in a flood that carried them up and out again. Above ground, umbrellas snapped open, hoods went up, and people braced themselves before stepping back into the relentless downpour. I was among them. A flimsy umbrella bent uselessly in my grip, my leather satchel weighing against my shoulder. I moved carefully, skirting potholes that had become small lakes, dodging the spray from passing vans, pushing forward street by street. By the time I reached Carroll Street, the rain had thickened into something solid, a curtain that swallowed everything beyond a few feet. My umbrella offered no defense. I reached my red door at number 42. Fingers stiff and clumsy as I fought the lock, the key slipped again and again against the wet brass. Frustration rose, swallowed instantly by the storm's roar. Then, finally, the mechanism gave. Inside, the door slammed shut against the night, sealing out the chaos. Warmth and silence settled around me. The umbrella dropped uselessly to the floor. My coat followed, sliding from its hook to collapse in a sodden heap. I left it there. I moved down the hallway, shedding the day piece by piece. Shoes kicked off, damp paperwork skidding across the floor. By the kitchen, my trousers joined the rest, abandoned without ceremony. I kept moving, half-dressed, hair dripping onto the wood beneath my feet. The kitchen greeted me in its usual state of neglect. A pan with the remnants of last night's dinner clung stubbornly to the stove. Dishes waited in the sink. A packet of English muffins sat half open. Notes from a brutal week of asylum hearings lay scattered near the kettle. My handwriting rushed and uneven. I ignored it all. Wine called louder than responsibility. I poured generously, the deep red catching the light, and took a long drink before carrying the glass into the living room. A lamp flickered on, casting soft amber across the worn sofa, the lined bookshelves, and stacks of vinyl leaning in imperfect order. At the window, radiator warmth rising against my legs. I watched the storm continue its assault on the street. Across the way, the brownstone at number 16 stood blurred behind the rain. A single upstairs window glowed gold against the darkness. Hannah and Rebecca's place. A quiet life unfolding somewhere dry and warm. I lingered there, letting the heat sink into me, fingers dragging absently through damp hair as I unbuttoned my shirt. Outside, a car crept past, searching hopelessly for parking. Another sip of wine, then a sound almost lost beneath the rain. Soft knock, so faint it might have been imagined. It came again, hesitant, careful. Tap, tap, tap. I stilled, glass hovering near my lips. The hallway felt longer on the return. At the door I called out, voice steady against the storm. A muffled reply came through the wood, uncertain and apologetic. Angela, it's Lauren. From next door, the bolt slid back. The door opened. She stood there drenched to the bone, hair plastered to her face and neck, water running freely down her skin. Younger, tall, striking even in this state. Chef's whites clinging to her frame, offering no protection from the cold. She hugged herself, shivering, words stumbling out between breaths as she explained the lost keys, the locked door, the hopeless situation. A quiet laugh slipped free. There was no chance of help coming in weather like this. Not tonight. Not for anything reasonable. The door opened wider, warmth spilled out to meet her. She stepped forward just enough for her gaze to shift, taking in the unbuttoned shirt, the bare skin beneath, the careless state I stood in. Color rushed instantly to her cheeks, her composure unraveling as quickly as her words. Apologies tumbled out. A step back into the rain followed, instinct pulling her away from the moment. I watched, amused by the way her shyness radiated so openly. The storm pressed against her back, insistent, unrelenting. My voice softened, steady certain as it cut through her panic. Inside was warmth, dryness, and a glass of wine waiting. A quiet, internal struggle played out across her face, caught between embarrassment and the simple, urgent need to escape the storm. Reassurance came easily, light and certain, cutting through her hesitation. The invitation stood firm, leaving no room for doubt. Lauren finally crossed the threshold. Water followed her in, dripping steadily onto the tiles, gathering into a small pool around her worn sneakers. She stood there, shivering, an elegant mess framed by the scattered remains of my own discarded day. The door shut behind her with weight and finality, sealing out the storm. The sudden silence pressed in, broken only by the sharp click of the deadbolt. In that moment, it was clear the night had shifted into something far more intriguing. A soft laugh slipped out as I stepped around the growing puddle at her feet. She was completely soaked, the kind of drenched that no half measure could fix. Instinct took over. Fingers moved quickly to the buttons of her heavy jacket, working them free. The fabric was stiff with cold, clinging stubbornly before finally giving way. As it slid from her shoulders, water spilled onto the floor in fresh droplets. Beneath it, her shirt clung to her skin, translucent with rain, outlining every line of her frame. The moment stretched briefly, an unspoken acknowledgement passing through a glance that lingered just a fraction too long. Then distance returned, hands lifting slightly in quiet surrender. Stillness was requested, gently but firmly, before I disappeared up the stairs. When I came back with a thick towel, she was balancing awkwardly, tugging off a shoe, the soaked fabric resisting with quiet, uncomfortable sounds. Her arms wrapped tightly around herself, as if she could hold the warmth in place. The towel was offered with a small, reassuring smile, and she followed into the living room, blotting at her hair and clothes. The space welcomed her with soft light and warmth. She was encouraged to settle in, to breathe, while I slipped away briefly. In the kitchen, a second glass was retrieved. Something about her presence had altered the atmosphere entirely, as if the air itself had shifted. When I returned, she had wandered toward the shelves, curiosity drawing her in. Her attention lingered on the vinyl collection, fingers brushing over mismatched stacks arranged without any clear logic. She pulled a couple of records at random, a faint smile appearing before a sudden shiver overtook her again. Wine alone wasn't going to be enough. The decision came easily, spoken with quiet authority. Warmth, real warmth, was needed. A bath would do what a glass never could. Her protests were immediate but weak. Undone by chattering teeth and the cold still clinging to her, there was no space for refusal. Glass in hand, she followed upstairs. Her gaze lingered more than she likely intended, a subtle awareness trailing behind each step. The staircase seemed longer under that attention, each movement carrying a quiet, deliberate rhythm. At the top, the hallway opened into a space far more composed than the chaos below. The bathroom waited at the end, spacious and carefully kept, centered around a deep clawfoot tub. Water roared to life, filling it quickly, steam rising in soft curls that blurred the mirrors. Scented oil slipped into the flow, releasing notes of sandalwood and cinnamon that settled into the air. Candles followed, one by one, their soft glow replacing the harshness of overhead light. Shadows danced along the walls, the room transforming into something warmer, softer, Removed from the storm still raging outside, when everything was ready, the gesture toward the bath was simple, accompanied by an easy smile. Gratitude came quietly, her voice softer now, her attention drawn downward as she shifted on cold feet that had begun to lose their color. The response was equally gentle, carrying a warmth that hadn't been there before distant closed without much thought. Curiosity lingered, playful, and just a little daring. The suggestion slipped out lightly, enough to spark a reaction exactly as expected. It landed, color rushed up her neck and across her face, her composure unraveling again as she clutched the towel closer, words tumbling out in hurried refusal. A soft laugh followed, easing the moment, pulling it back from the edge. The tease was brushed aside as nothing more than that, though the air still carried its trace. The door became the next step, even as a quiet part of me resisted leaving. There was a pull there, something tempting in the tension she carried so openly. Still, restraint held, time was offered, warmth encouraged. The promise of help lingered if needed. The door closed gently behind me. For a moment, I stayed in the hallway, listening to the steady rush of water filling the tub. My pulse felt different now, quicker, sharper. Something about her, her hesitation, her presence, the way she looked at me, had stirred something long neglected, desire, uncomplicated and immediate. A small smile surfaced as I turned away, heading back downstairs. Clothes were changed quickly, damp fabric replaced with something soft and familiar. The comfort settled in easily as I returned to the living room, the quiet hum of music filling the space. A book opened in my hands, though focus refused to follow. Thoughts drifted upward, uninvited. Steam, warmth, the image of her finally relaxing, shedding the cold. Discipline tried to reassert itself. Boundaries lined up neatly in theory. Neighbor, younger, unknown territory. The situation itself carried its own absurdity, one that demanded normalcy. But memory pushed back, the way she had looked at the door, the flush in her cheeks, the hesitation in her voice. It hadn't been simple nerves. There had been something else, something harder to ignore. Wine dulled the edge slightly. Music washing over the room as the same line of text was read again and again without meaning. Time passed unnoticed until movement upstairs broke the rhythm. Footsteps followed, soft against the stairs. She appeared in the doorway wrapped in a thick robe, hair still damp, cheeks flushed from heat rather than cold. The transformation was immediate, striking in its simplicity. An invitation to sit came naturally. The space beside me opened with an easy gesture. She settled carefully, leaving distance between us. Posture controlled, movements deliberate. The tension hadn't left her. It lingered, visible in every small adjustment. Conversation stayed light, though attention wandered freely. The robe drew the eye, the way it draped, the way she held it close. Words followed that carried more weight than they needed to, enough to reignite that same blush, deeper this time. The reaction confirmed what instinct had already begun to suspect. Practicality returned to the surface, though it carried an undercurrent of amusement. Rest was the next logical step. The suggestion landed abruptly, catching her off guard. Resistance surfaced again, immediate and uncertain. Alternatives were offered quickly, none of them sensible. The image of her outside again in the storm made the idea collapse on its own. A quiet laugh broke through, warm and certain, dismissing the notion entirely. No hesitation was allowed to take root. The decision was firm, almost effortless. She wouldn't be left to fend for herself or pretend comfort on a sofa. There was a proper bed upstairs, and that was where she would sleep. The effect was immediate. Lauren's eyes widened, her thoughts clearly racing ahead of her, imagination spiraling faster than she could contain it. Color rushed to her face in a vivid wave, her fingers tightening around the delicate stem of her glass. Panic flickered so openly that it became impossible not to laugh, the sound warm and unrestrained. The clarification followed quickly, softening the moment without entirely undoing it. The room next door, already prepared, already waiting. Relief washed over her, though it carried something faint beneath it. Something quieter, harder to name. She drained the rest of her drink in one steady motion, leaning forward just slightly. The urge to push the moment a little further proved too tempting to ignore. The tone shifted, playful with an edge that hovered just on the boundary of mischief. The suggestion landed, and Lauren nearly choked, startled into a flustered cough that broke whatever composure she had managed to gather. Apology came with laughter, light and unrepentant as tissues were offered. The teasing was acknowledged for what it was, though the spark behind it remained very much alive. The moment moved on, or at least pretended to. Rising from the sofa, stretching lazily, the invitation to follow came naturally. She did, close behind, her presence easy to feel without needing to look. Awareness lingered in every step up the stairs, in every quiet pause between movements. The air carried a subtle tension now, something charged and undeniable. At the top, the hallway stretched out in soft light. Passing the first open door offered a glimpse into a space that felt lived in and unmistakably personal. Clothes draped carelessly, candles lining the sill, artwork that held attention just a second too long. The bed itself looked inviting in a way that made the room feel warmer than the rest of the house. The second door opened to something quieter, smaller but just as thoughtfully prepared. The bed was already turned down, soft light glowing from the bedside lamp. Small details, water, a fresh toothbrush, waited as if she had always been expected. Lauren stepped inside slowly, taking it in, her movements tentative. The robe tightened around her instinctively, awareness settling over her again as she remembered what lay beneath it. Gratitude came quietly, almost shy now, accompanied by a faint, self-conscious smile. Small, ordinary gestures followed, straightening the duvet, adjusting pillows, yet they carried a strange intimacy, as though something unspoken had already begun to take shape. The offer of comfort lingered in the air, simple on the surface, but layered underneath. At the doorway, a pause stretched just long enough to let the moment breathe. The tone shifted again, softer, more suggestive, before breaking into something deliberately absurd that pulled a laugh from her, easing the tension just enough. The door closed behind me. In the hallway, a quiet satisfaction settled in. None of it had been accidental. Every word, every glance, every pause had been deliberate, and the effect had been clear. It had been there from the beginning, if I was honest. Noticed in passing moments, in glances that lingered just a fraction too long, in the way she carried herself. Confident in one breath, uncertain in the next distant had felt safer before. Uncertainty had kept things contained. Tonight had erased that doubt. Back in my own room, the routine of getting ready for bed unfolded almost automatically, though my thoughts refused to stay grounded. The quiet space, the dim light, the awareness of her just beyond the wall. It all fed something restless and newly awake. A single candle lit the room, its glow soft and unsteady. The stillness settled in, but it wasn't empty. It carried anticipation, curiosity, something unspoken that lingered just beneath the surface. Silence followed, but it wasn't complete. There was always the possibility of sound, of movement, of awareness drifting between rooms. Whether imagined or real hardly mattered. Eventually, the quiet deepened, pulling everything with it. Sleep came easily enough, threaded with impressions that refused to fade. Warmth, color, fleeting expressions that lingered long after they should have. Morning arrived clean and bright, the storm gone as if it had never existed. Sunlight spilled across the city, catching on wet pavement and turning it gold, the air fresh with that unmistakable clarity that follows heavy rain. Morning arrived gently, the storm reduced to memory. I stretched out beneath the covers before slipping from bed, pulling on a simple gray shirt and worn jeans. The house was quiet as I moved downstairs, careful not to disturb the stillness she slept in. In the kitchen, routine took over. Fresh beans ground beneath my hands, their rich aroma filling the space. Music followed, something soft, reflective, setting the tone for the calm that had replaced last night's chaos. I found myself humming along as the espresso machine hissed to life. Then faintly, the sound of movement above. Floorboards shifting. She was awake. A small smile formed as I prepared a second cup. Her footsteps came slowly down the stairs, hesitant. When she appeared in the doorway, it took effort not to laugh. She looked adorably flustered, fully dressed now in her uniform, though it carried the wrinkles of hurried use. In her arms, she clutched a bundle of bedding, like it might shield her from something unspoken. Her face was flushed, her eyes uncertain, her hair still carrying the softness of sleep. The greeting came easily, light and warm, as if nothing unusual lingered from the night before. She answered, though her voice betrayed her. Tight, careful. Searching for steadiness, our eyes met, and for a brief moment something unspoken passed between us. I let it linger just enough, a flicker of ambiguity, something she could interpret however she chose. Her reaction was immediate, color rising again, gaze slipping away. She gestured awkwardly to the bedding, offering an explanation that didn't quite hold together. I pointed her toward the laundry room, thanking her in a way that only made her more self-conscious. She hurried off, clearly relieved to have somewhere to place it, to put distance between herself and whatever thoughts had followed her downstairs. When she returned, I held out coffee, offering more out of habit than expectation. The same phrase slipped out again, casual, but carrying a weight that hung between us. Her reaction was subtle but unmistakable. A quick refusal. A step back, she was already retreating. Leaning against the counter, I watched her carefully, letting just enough challenge slip into my tone to test the moment. For a heartbeat, she wavered. It was there in her posture, in the way her eyes flickered back toward me. Then she pulled away from it. The decision came softly but firmly. She needed to leave. I let it go. The walk to the door was easy, conversation light again. The storm reduced to something almost amusing now that it had passed. Outside, sunlight poured across the street, catching on wet pavement and turning everything bright. The world felt freshly washed, quiet and open. She stepped out, then turned back, gratitude written clearly across her face, though the words themselves felt too small to carry it. The response came naturally, genuine and uncomplicated. A brief pause followed, that familiar uncertainty of how to end something that didn't fit neatly into ordinary categories. It lingered just long enough to make a choice inevitable. I stepped forward. The gesture was simple, deliberate. A hand at her neck, a gentle pull, and then a kiss. Soft, warm, just long enough to leave no doubt that it meant something more than courtesy. She didn't resist. The tension in her body melted in an instant, replaced by something quieter, deeper. Breath caught, stillness settling around us for that brief suspended moment, then it ended. I drew back, pulling her into a brief embrace before leaning close, voice lowered just enough to carry meaning meant only for her. The effect was immediate, a ripple of shock running through her as realization took hold. I stepped away, leaving her with it. The door closed softly. Inside, silence returned, but it felt different now, charged, satisfied. A quiet smile lingered as I stood there for a moment, replaying everything in my mind. Upstairs, the guest room still held traces of her presence. The bed stripped the space, slightly altered. And there, resting where it hadn't been left before, a small detail that spoke volumes. I picked it up, letting the moment settle in, understanding more than she had likely intended to reveal. A soft laugh followed. Back downstairs, coffee waited. I settled into the sofa, book in hand, though my thoughts were elsewhere entirely. There was no doubt in my mind. This wasn't the end of anything. It was a beginning. Outside, the city carried on, bright and renewed. She moved through it slowly, the weight of the morning still on her, something unspoken following her every step. The sun warmed the streets, but it did little to quiet whatever thoughts had taken hold. From the window, I watched her go. The hesitation in her movements, the absent touch of her lips, the glance back toward the house. It all spoke louder than words ever could. I lifted my cup slightly. A silent acknowledgement she would never see. This was only the start.